Hi everybody, my name's Kat Ward. I'm from Elevator, one of Scotland's leading business and entrepreneurial support organisations, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our very first edition of Let's Talk. And Let's Talk is a series of activities supported by Royal Bank of Scotland to encourage more women to think of setting up or expanding their business. So, as I mentioned, this is the first in a series of four what we're going to be podcasts but are now broadcasts, looking at some topics of areas that affect women in business in a bit more detail. And I'm delighted that we're able to take a slightly different angle from the usual conventional business talk. And we are welcoming with us today Dr Mairi Macleod, evolutionary behavioural biologist, to give us some insight on leadership. Mairi, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
Mairi, we're going to have a chat in a few minutes, but what would be useful is if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and give us an overview about some of the work that you've been carrying out.
Sure. Well, as you said, I'm an evolutionary behavioural biologist. What that is I look at behaviour and I look at how we've evolved, what we've evolved to achieve with our behaviours in different contexts and different environments. But I actually started out my career studying animal behaviour, so I was going all over the world to remote different places, studying animals. But then when I came to start a family, I found I couldn't kind of trog off to the jungle and follow monkeys about, so I had to figure out something else. So I became a freelance science writer, and I wrote for the press, for magazines and newspapers about behaviour. First of all, animal behaviour, and then moving more and more onto human behaviour. And then I've been doing that for quite a few years now. And over the years, I've built up, a big knowledge of human behaviour, and basically came to find that I can use that to help people achieve their goals in kind of real life. And I'm mainly concentrating on helping women, so with things like relationships, but also in the areas of leadership and entrepreneurship as well. And much of this is based on understanding how men and women do things differently, how we've evolved to kind of approach things in a slightly different way. So that's what I'm doing.
Fabulous. It's fascinating. So Mairi, tell us a wee bit more about how studying animal behaviour helped you shed a light on human behaviour.
Well, when you study animal behaviour, you're looking at much more simple systems compared with human behaviour. And if you look at different behaviours in different species and different environments, then you can, come to some inferences about human behaviour too. But if we're looking at the realms of, the differences in influence of men and women, or males and females, I can tell you about some stuff that I witnessed when I was doing my fieldwork in South Africa. This was for my PhD. I was studying the behaviour of blue monkeys. And what happened then, this was way back in the 90s. I went out to South Africa, and the species had been studied in other parts of Africa before, and the received wisdom back then was that this species, blue monkeys, live in small groups with one adult male who's kind of in charge, and some females and juveniles. And the males, fight with other males and kind of take over a troop. And basically females are viewed as passive prizes of male-male competition. But when I went to study my groups of monkeys, I found some very different things going on. So I got out there, I worked out 3 troops to study. And then I found in the mating season in one of the troops, the behaviour started to kind of diverge from what I was led to believe was going to be the case. So I would, go out every day following individual monkeys and, kind of struggling through the undergrowth to follow them as they were, wheeling through the trees. And when I was following individual female monkeys, sometimes I would find that they start kind of traveling far away from the rest of the group, and I thought, what's going on here? And we'd sort of get, way away from the other monkeys. And it turned out they were meeting up with other males, and they were having hanky-panky with these other males. And this happened more and more with more of the females. And gradually what was happening was they were kind of attracting more males into the group. And so it became a multi-male group instead of a one-male group. And what eventually happened, after all the kind of mating and stuff was going on, the sort of dominant male of the outside males kind of kicked all the other males out, including the old troop male, and he took over. And so it reverted back to the original structure of a one male group. But what was clear to me in that situation was it was the females that did it. You know, they were the ones that kind of influenced the changeover of the males. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, we're kind of normally thinking of the sort of surface structure and we see the guys are in charge. And I think it's very similar in a lot of human organizations too. You know, in humans, although the guys are sort of nominally in charge, there's a hell of a lot of influence of females going on in the background, and women do a lot of leadership that's maybe not recognised or paid for, in fact, but it's definitely going on. So that's one of my findings anyway.
It must have been fascinating to spend that time out there and just following packs of animals. I'm not sure if it's packs of monkeys, I'm sure there's a genetic term for it, but fantastic. So you touched there on leadership. Can you tell us a wee bit more about the behaviour of different apes and the different forms of leadership that you saw, you identified?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't studied apes myself, but definitely when you look at the behaviour of our very closest relatives in the animal kingdom, you get some very interesting differences in leadership. So, for example, one of our closest relatives is the chimpanzee. And anyone that's watched any David Attenborough documentaries will kind of probably know that in chimpanzees, you know, the males are much bigger than the females, and they can be very aggressive. Not always, but they can be very aggressive. And, you know, males try to fight with other males to be the dominant male. And they're very much in charge of the group, and they dominate the females. But our other closest relative in the animal kingdom are the bonobos. And bonobos, they look very similar to chimpanzees, but they have a completely different set of behaviours. And in bonobos, it's the females that are in charge. They're the ones that lead the group. And they do so in a much more chilled way than chimpanzees. You know, they're much more peaceful. And so the females, you know, they don't fight very much or anything. In fact, if there's any tension in the group, they tend to resolve that through having sex. You know, they're the ape that makes love, not war. But the reason that they are able to be in charge and kind of have priority of access to food and things like that is because the girls get together and they form alliances with each other. And what that means then is that they're able to outrank the males and lead the group in their sort of peaceful way. So it's a completely different circumstance to what you find in chimpanzees. So I think it's quite interesting looking at the two different ways.
And how would you identify these forms of leadership, and how might they relate to human organisations and groups?
Well, we humans, we have evolved essentially two different kinds of leadership. And these in some ways parallel what we see in chimpanzees and bonobos and the differences between them. So one of the forms of leadership is prestige-based leadership, kind of bonobo-style leadership. This is where you lead through influence. So you follow people whose, you know, experience and talents you respect. You know, you respect their reputations, so you follow them, and they're the leaders. And this is kind of how it was back in the day when we humans used to live in small groups of hunter-gatherers, you know, early on in our evolution. And, you know, with prestige-based leadership works well in small groups where everyone kind of knows each other, they know each other's reputations, and you know what each other's abilities are. And then the other form of leadership we have is dominance leadership. So this is where the guy at the top tells everyone else what to do, you know, and this is what we tend to find in big corporations nowadays, and the military and in political systems. It tends to work well in these big organizations because everyone knows their place. You have a big hierarchy. But this form of leadership, you know, it's a bit more like chimpanzees, I suppose. This came about more recently in human history with the advent of agriculture, and more so with the advent of industry, where, you know, the individuals who could accrue the most resources could have the most power. And that kind of bought into the psychology of men, really, because the men who could get the most resources, have the highest status, compete with other males for this, they got the most sex, basically, you know, they got the most women. And that's what's sort of driven our, you know, the biology. So, you know, those are the kind of two forms of leadership we have in humans. But although the dominance leadership seems to work well for men in big organizations, it doesn't work so well for women. So women tend to be more inclined to a sort of more prestige-based situation, so that they're more comfortable with, influencing things in a different way. So I think what we find is that there's a sort of mismatch between, women's evolved ways of leading and what we find in the modern world. So it doesn't necessarily suit women's way of leading so well.
So what do you think that businesses can do to become more prestige driven? You've outlined some of the advantages of this, but if you want to go into that in a wee bit more detail, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, well, it would definitely benefit us to be in a more prestige-based situation. Basically, sort of trying to work in a hierarchical organization is not good for anyone, not for men or women, really, in terms of your well-being and your mental health. Our human psychology wasn't really designed to cope with that kind of thing where, you're working for a boss that's issuing orders that you've got no say in, you've got no autonomy or anything. Much better to be in a situation where, you can get involved in decision making and actually use your talents and be respected for that. So, you can have a sort of flatter organizational structure where, there's more equality and more inclusion. So I think that, we're obviously talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who have either small companies or, are looking to grow those. I think people with small companies are in a perfect situation to kind of grow prestige-based organizations, because it works best in small groups, where everyone kind of knows each other. And so the way to have a prestige-based system is to have transparency, let people know why decisions are being made in the way they are, or why you're doing what you're doing. Involve everyone in decision making. Have leaders being held accountable for what they do, and let people, let all the employees decide who's going to be leading in certain jobs or whatever. And also it's about paying attention to people's individual talents and experience so that everyone can feel valued. And this kind of buys into our kind of old needs of needing autonomy over what we do, needing to sort of feel that we're competent and, are being respected for what we can bring, and also being able to attend to our social relationships and have more flexibility. But I think the big one, the one that's sort of relevant here is if you have more women in positions of influence, then your organization will kind of grow quite naturally into more prestige-based system, because just like bonobo females, women tend to have a more inclusive style naturally, so having more women in there will help you grow that prestige. And how do we get more women into positions of influence? Then then it comes down to actually following the way of bonobo females and forming alliances, because if you have female alliances, women can naturally help each other and support each other into positions of influence. So,
and do you think that also applies to? So we're talking about women in the business world, but what about solo founders? Because a lot of the people who'll be watching today are perhaps on their own. Does this apply to them too?
Absolutely, yes. Obviously, if you're a solo entrepreneur, you would have to go outside of your own business to form alliances. But of course we can do that. And that's a really important thing to do, especially with other people who have, perhaps different but complementary skills to you, a sort of different backgrounds, so that, you can each bring sort of different skills to the party, if you like. And I gather the elevator is facilitating this sort of thing, so that's a great thing. To give you a couple of examples from my own business, one of the things I do is I speak, and I'm a member of the Professional Speakers Association. And we decided, a few of the women members, we decided to form a mastermind group. There's just 5 of us, so it's a small group, and it's important that it's a small group. But we meet up, once every couple of months. We have a coffee. We, discuss kind of our issues and problems that we might be having, and get some ideas and advice from others. And I think the fact that it's just women in the group, I think it makes a big difference. I think if there were men there, it would be different. There'd be sort of competition going on. sort of, perhaps egos getting in there as well. Women don't have egos, but men tend to have bigger ones. And so it's really helpful, and you feel you've got someone to have your back, and you can trust each other, and you can recommend each other. So that's great. And also the other thing you can do, of course, is to actually form business collaborations with other people. So in that regard, one thing that I've been doing just lately is I've just finished running a pilot for an online course to help women over 50 find a partner, so through using science and psychology. So I've just got to the end of that, and I'm sort of getting all the feedback together, and it's gone really great. I've had a great time. But now I'm getting into the phase where I want to sort of work out the marketing for sort of launching, the full course. And one of my ways of doing that, I think, is going to be collaborating with other women who might have skills that would be sort of relevant and useful within my course, but are different from what I do. So I was thinking of, I'm already talking to a couple of women, but I'm thinking of looking for someone that does stuff on confidence building, maybe also diet and exercise, to sort of kind of, maybe provide sort of short modules for my course, and then we can promote each other. And I think it's really exciting working with other women like that, and maybe people that have similar audiences but a different approach, a different kind of thing that they're doing. And working with other women, you just understand each other better. You understand the issues, you understand the kind of limitations that you have, or the other commitments that you've got to deal with, and it just feels so good. And getting together with other women means that you can support each other, and it's a game changer. You can give each other more confidence, and it just means that you feel that you can move forwards more easily. I think it's
we've definitely seen that with the monthly coffee and chat sessions that we've been hosting, where it's getting that message across that you can't do it all, and you don't have to do it all. So work with people that have got complementary skills and strengths to actually add value to each of your respective businesses, which is wonderful. And I guess there's something around that notion of accepting that that you can't be skilled in every single area. So that's something that's really important as well to get across. So Mairi, we're reaching almost the end of our conversation. It flies past. It always goes on far too quickly. For anyone that's watching, what would be the final takeaway that you would want to give to someone?
I would say, really, value your, female alliances, and try to do something like a mastermind group or whatever, get together a small group of other women who have different skills, different backgrounds, so that you can all bring something to the group. It's important to keep the group small, because if you have a big group of women, you can get competition going on. Quite often it's covert, and it might be not very nice. But what the research shows is that women do best when they have a small number of very strong bonds with other women, rather than a sort of big loose coalition, which is more the way that men do things. So a small group of women who trust each other, that trust is the really important thing. And then you'll do so much better, you'll have more confidence, and you'll know someone's got your back, and that's going to help you a lot.
That's fabulous. I love the idea of a mastermind group, and trust is such an important part of it. Mairi, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fantastic and fascinating to speak to you today. And anyone who wants to find out more about what you're doing can find more details on your website. So www.mairimacleod.com.
Perfect. Yeah.
Wonderful. And we'll be chatting again in 2021. I have to not say 2020, even though we feel like we should reboot 2020. So we'll be chatting again in February. Thank you so much for your time.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mairi. So thank you to Mairi. That was absolutely fascinating, and it just shows that we can learn so much from science and from animal behaviour. So hopefully this has inspired you to check out some of the other activities that we're carrying out as part of the Let's Talk programme. As we touched on briefly, we have a monthly drop-in session, or coffee and chat, which I think I'm going to call it, we call it the mastermind group session. And we also have a series of workshops. And if you want more details, then check out our Facebook group, Let's Talk About What's Stopping You. So in the meantime, I just want to thank you for your time. And we will see you in February 2021. And in the meantime, be brave.